Good morning, everyone. I'm Emily Jashinsky, host of After Party and the Megyn Kelly Wrap-Up Show on SiriusXM Channel 111. It's Thursday, January 8th, 2026. This is your AM update.
A woman attacked them and those surrounding them and attempted to run them over.
Tensions flaring in Minnesota after a woman was shot and killed by an ICE officer during an enforcement operation.
My message is clear: eat real food.
The Trump administration unveils a dramatic overhaul of the nation's food guidelines. U.S. forces seize two so-called ghost ships in its effort to crack down on the sale of sanctioned Venezuelan oil. And Nick Reiner's attorney exits the case. All that and more coming up in just a moment on your AM Update.
You know all those fad diets. Half of Americans do it. And if you do it enough, you could be at risk of diabetes, liver damage, heart attack, and stroke. Weight cycling is when you lose 10 or more pounds, but then you put the pounds back plus a couple more. That puts tremendous strain on your organs and leads to serious health issues. Bottom line, most people need help to stop weight cycling. And this is why I want to tell you about non-prescription lean, created by doctors. Lean is an oral supplement, not a GLP-1 injectable. It uses studied ingredients, which Lean says target weight loss in three powerful ways: maintaining healthy blood sugar, helping control appetite and cravings, and burning fat by converting it to energy. And burning fat helps keep the weight off. If you want to lose meaningful weight at a healthy pace and keep it off, consider adding Lean to your diet and exercise lifestyle. Get 20% off when you enter MK at takelean.com. That's code MK at takelean.com.
Riots breaking out in Minneapolis after a woman was shot and killed by an ICE officer amid a DHS operation surging 2,000 additional agents to the sanctuary city. According to DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, an ICE vehicle got stuck in the snow. As law enforcement agents attempted to free it, a group of agitators began blocking them in and shouting at them. Videos on social media showing a maroon Honda Pilot stopped perpendicularly on Portland Avenue. The videos capturing only a portion of the encounter, not the events leading up to it. Agents seen pulling up to the vehicle, commanding the driver to step out. One agent reaches for the driver's door handle as two other agents approach the vehicle. The driver reverses briefly, then begins driving forward into an area where one agent was standing. The agent in the path of the vehicle, shooting his firearm multiple times, first through the windshield, then the driver's side window. The video shows the car speeding up before quickly crashing into other parked vehicles. The 37-year-old driver identified as Renee Nicole Good. Officials saying she was not a target of an ICE operation. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem defending the unidentified ICE agent yesterday.
It's very clear that this individual was harassing and impeding law enforcement operations. Our officer followed his training, did exactly what he's been taught to do in that situation, and took actions to defend himself and defend his fellow law enforcement officers.
Secretary Noem saying the officer was treated then released at a local hospital. President Trump in a Truth Social post also characterizing the incident as self-defense. Quote, "The woman driving the car was very disorderly, obstructing and resisting, who then violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer, who seems to have shot her in self-defense." Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, a Democrat, quickly casting blame on the Trump administration yesterday, with inflammatory remarks at a press conference.
We've dreaded this moment since the early stages of this ICE presence in Minneapolis. What they are doing is not to provide safety in America. What they are doing is causing chaos and distrust. They're ripping families apart. They're sowing chaos on our streets. And in this case, quite literally killing people. They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. Having seen the video of myself, I want to tell everybody directly, that is bullshit. And I have a message for ICE. To ICE, get the fuck out of Minneapolis.
The mayor calling the administration's assertions that the officer acted in self-defense a, quote, garbage narrative. Governor Tim Walz also blaming the Trump administration, calling the operation a, quote, dangerous, sensationalized threat to public safety. Tensions flaring in the streets in the hours following the incident. video capturing civilians throwing snowballs at Minneapolis police officers, some agents seen deploying pepper spray amid confrontation with protesters. Elsewhere in town, rioters bursting into the Minneapolis courthouse, shouting, quote, "ICE out now." Governor Walz saying he placed the Minnesota National Guard on a warning order in anticipation of unrest. The shooting is under investigation by the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and FBI. Megyn will have more on the Megyn Kelly Show later today. The Trump administration releasing new dietary guidelines yesterday, flipping the old model on its head, literally, unveiling a brand new food pyramid, which is now inverted. The new image showing a smorgasbord of meats, cheeses, dairy products, healthy fats, fresh fruits, and vegetables, tapering down to a small portion of whole grains at the bottom. The administration saying the changes are aimed at confronting rising rates of obesity and chronic diseases, including diabetes and heart disease, affecting a significant number of Americans. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. from the White House yesterday outlining the new guidelines.
Today, the lies stop. The new guidelines recognize that whole, nutrient-dense food is the most effective path to better health and lower healthcare costs. Protein and healthy fats are essential and were wrongly discouraged in prior dietary guidelines. We are ending the war on saturated fats. Diets rich in vegetables and fruits reduce disease risk more effectively than many drugs. Whole grains outperform refined carbohydrates. Added sugars, especially sugar-sweetened beverages, drive metabolic disease, and today our government declares war on added sugar. Highly processed foods loaded with additives, added sugar, and excess salt damage health and should be avoided. As Secretary of Health and Human Services, my message is clear: eat real food.
Emphasis is placed on consuming foods in their original form, whether fresh, frozen, or canned, rather than opting for processed foods. The guidelines recommending capping added sugars to 10 grams per meal, though saying children under 10 should not consume any added sugars. The administration reversing course on previous guidelines, now endorsing whole-fat milk and dairy products. The updated recommendations calling to prioritize protein with each meal, advising amounts that double the old benchmark depending on an individual's body weight. FDA Commissioner Marty McCary explaining the rationale.
The old guidelines had such a low protein recommendation that we are increasing that by 50 to 100%. Kids need protein. The old protein guidelines were to prevent starvation and withering away. These new protein guidelines are designed for American kids to thrive, and they're based on science, not on dogma. We have 40% of our kids now with a chronic disease. It is not their fault. This is something that is the result of bad advice from the government and a medical establishment that for decades peddled research from a flawed 1960s model.
The American Heart Association praising the emphasis on eating more fruit and vegetables while reducing processed foods and added sugars, but saying, quote, "We are concerned that recommendations regarding salt seasoning and red meat consumption could inadvertently lead consumers to exceed recommended limits for sodium and saturated fats, which are primary drivers of cardiovascular disease." Dr. Oz, head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, on the projected savings from reshaping America's food culture.
Right now, we're increasing health expenditures in America at roughly twice the rate of the GDP growth. We will correct that if we can get America to be healthier, because you can't be a wealthy nation without being a healthy nation. So 30% of healthcare costs are directly attributable to obesity. I'm not talking about indirect associated expenses, which are also present, but a very conservative number, 30%, are directly attributed to obesity. That's about $300 billion a year for just Medicare. If we were to affect obesity by 10%, which is an incredibly conservative and justifiable assumption that has been borne out in evidence-based dietary experiments and trials, just that alone is $30 billion of reduction of expenses for Medicare.
The guidelines help determine what is served in school cafeterias, military facilities, and federal nutrition programs like SNAP, which provides food subsidies for poor people. The White House saying the new guidelines will be implemented over the next 2 years. Coming up, 2 oil tankers seized by U.S. forces, the latest in the U.S.-run blockade of sanctioned Venezuelan oil. And Nick Reiner's plea in court delayed once again.
Every new year, people think about what a real fresh start looks like. For many, it begins at home. January is a great time to refresh your space and start the year feeling grounded. And Cozy Earth can be your go-to for that reset. They just launched their new Baja bedding set. It's their first fully matching collection. Sheets, duvet cover, quilt, all inspired by the soothing tones of Baja California. The designs are gorgeous, the fabrics feel premium, and it gives your bedroom that elevated resort-like look. And do not forget the luxe bath towels. These towels are incredible, made from a cotton and bamboo viscose blend with zero twist technology, so they are plush, absorbent, and feel like a warm hug when you step out of the shower. Everything comes with a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. Start the new year with real comfort. Go to CozyEarth.com, use my code Megyn for up to 20% off. CozyEarth.com, code Megyn. And if you get a post-purchase survey, tell them you heard about Cozy Earth right here.
The Coast Guard and U.S. military counterparts yesterday conducting pre-dawn seizures of 2 oil tankers, including a Russian-flagged vessel. The separate operations marking the latest enforcement actions under the Trump administration's expanded sanctions targeting Venezuelan oil exports. One ship was coming from Venezuela, while the other was en route there, which is under a U.S. naval blockade aimed at stopping sanctioned oil tankers from trading Venezuelan crude. U.S. officials say the ships are part of a so-called ghost fleet, tankers that frequently change names and flags in an attempt to evade sanctions. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem posting on X about the Russian-flagged ship, quote, "One of these tankers, motor tanker Bella 1, has been trying to evade the Coast Guard for weeks, even changing its flag and painting a new name on the hull while being pursued, in a desperate and failed attempt to escape justice." The Bella 1 crew renaming the ship Marinera as the U.S. Coast Guard tracked it across the ocean for the last 2 weeks. The Russian Ministry of Transport confirming yesterday the ship was, quote, "granted temporary permission to sail under the state flag of the Russian Federation." White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stating the U.S.'s view is that the vessel was stateless and flying a false flag. U.S. officials confirming the seizure of the Bella 1 this morning in the North Atlantic between Iceland and the British Isles. UK Defense Secretary John Healey, whose country provided the U.S. with support in this operation, saying, quote, "This ship, with a nefarious history, is part of a Russian-Iranian axis of sanctions evasion, which is fueling terrorism, conflict, and misery from the Middle East to Ukraine." The second ship, called the Sophia, boarded in the Caribbean Sea. CBS News reporting the Sophia had disembarked from Venezuela with oil on board. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth yesterday telling reporters the seizure of sanctioned oil vessels will continue.
2 oil tankers, 2 overnight, were seized by the United States of America, stateless or sanctioned, because the oil blockade, the quarantine of oil out of unsanctioned or sanctioned or stateless vessels continues. That leverage will continue, as Secretary Rubio outlined. So our military is prepared to continue this. As he said, the president, when he speaks, he means it. He's not messing around. We are an administration of action to advance our interests, and that is on full display.
U.S. forces seizing 2 other oil tankers last month. A curveball in the Nick Reiner case yesterday, as high-profile attorney Alan Jackson removes himself from the case. The 32-year-old is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances in the brutal December stabbing deaths of his parents, famed director Rob Reiner and Michelle Reiner. Nick appearing in Los Angeles Superior Court, where he was expected to enter a plea on the charges. Nick wearing a brown prison jumpsuit, white t-shirt, and shackles at the hearing, Judge Teresa McGonigal appointing a public defender to represent Nick going forward. Jackson addressing reporters outside the courthouse after the proceedings on his withdrawal from the case.
I'm legally and I'm ethically prohibited from explaining all the reasons why. I know that's a question on everybody's mind. We expect the public defender to step in. They've already been appointed and very capably protect Nick Reiner's interests as he moves forward through the system. But be clear, be very, very clear about this. My team and I remain deeply, deeply committed to Nick Reiner and to his best interests. What we've learned, and you can take this to the bank, is that pursuant to the laws of this state, pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder. Print that. Print that.
MK True Crime host Phil Holloway tells us there are only two reasons in this scenario that a lawyer might withdraw from a case. The first, Holloway says, is a conflict of interest, which he believes is unlikely. Rather, it seems to Holloway, the issue is financial.
Oftentimes, clients make agreements to pay certain amounts of money, and for whatever reasons, they're unable to meet that commitment. It seems like some of these beneficiaries of the Reiner estate might be trying to fund the defense of Nick Reiner. And it's ironic because this estate is in a trust, and so you've got these beneficiaries who are maybe his siblings or other family members. And if part of them wants to pay his defense out of the body or the corpus of that trust, there might be other beneficiaries of that trust that say, wait a minute, not so fast. So there's been speculation that the trust or the estate of Rob Reiner might be actually funding his defense. And I predicted early on that I didn't think that was going to work out in the long run.
Holloway believes Nick's team has two lanes of defense to pursue. The first, that Nick is not guilty by reason of insanity. And secondly, that he is not mentally fit to stand trial. However, Holloway is not confident those routes will succeed.
I think the evidence shows that he knew right from wrong. He took steps to conceal his alleged involvement in the crime and to hide his identity, and things like that suggest that he knew right from wrong. He may very well have been in the throes of some type of psychosis, but that doesn't mean he did not know right from wrong. And if his psychosis was chemically induced, well, that gets cured by virtue of his being in jail and not taking drugs. Therefore, he would be competent to stand trial. So this is a long shot, either way you slice it. It's something that the legal team is going to have to look at. I just don't think it's going to work.
Nick's arraignment is now set for February 23rd. That'll do it for your AM update. I'm Emily Jashinsky, host of After Party. Catch The Megyn Kelly Show live on SiriusXM's The Megyn Kelly Channel 111 at noon East, on youtube.com/Megyn Kelly, and all podcast platforms.